Hello everyone. This is our fifth lecture. So, in this lecture, we are going to study governance and globalization. Here, we are going to study that what actually governance and globalization is. What is the actual meaning of the word governance and globalization? So, we are going to start with the introduction. In a simple and broad-based definition of the world governance, the term is used to designate designate all regulations intended for organization and centralization of human societies on the global scale. Forum for a New World Governance. Reasons for this forum or a New World Governance. Traditionally, government has been associated with governing or with political authorities, institutions, and ultimately control. Governance, however, denotes formal political institutions that aim to coordinate and control independent social relations and that have the ability to enforce by force their decisions. However, authors like James have also used governance to denote the regulation of interdependent relations in absence of an overreaching political authority such as in the traditional system. Some now speak of development of a global public policy. Adil Najma is a scholar on the subject that the that the Pratt School of Global Studies, Boston University has defined global governance simply as the management of global processes in the absence of global government. According to Thomas J. Director of Director of Ralph Bunche Institute for International Studies at, at the Graduate at the Graduate Center and editor 2000 to 2005 of the journal Global Governance, a review of multilateralism and international organization, global governance, which has been good, bad, or indifferent refers to concentrate cooperative problem-solving or problem-solving arrangements, many of which increasingly involve not only United Nations of States but also other UNs, namely international secretariats and other non-state actors. In other words, In other words, global governance refers to the way in which global affairs are managed. Now we are going to study that what is the usage of governance and globalization. In dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of a very long period of international history based on a policy of balance of powers. Since this historic event, the planet has entered a phase of geo- geographical breakdown. The international security model, for example, while still in place for the both government in is gradually giving way to to enter to an emerging collective consistence that extends beyond the restricted framework. It represents the Cold War. It, it represents. Now, moving towards the next point, which is the post Cold War world of the 90s saw a new fragment emerging based on the number of issues. The growing idea of globalization as a significant theme and as a significant theme weakening of nation states point to a prospect of transferring to global level of regulation instruments upon the model of that regulation was no longer working effectively at the national or regional level. An intensification of environmental concern which received the multilateral endorsement at the Earth Summit. The summit issues relating the climate and biodiversity symbolized a new approach that was soon to be expressed conceptually by the term global commons. The emergence of conflict over standard trade and environment, trade and property rights, trade and the public health. These conflicts continue the tradition debate over the social effect of microeconomic stabilization policies and raise the question of arbitration among the equality. We are going to study that what was the context. There are those who believe that world architecture depends upon on the establishing on the establishing a system of world governance. However, the equation is currently being far more complicated, whereas the process used to be about regulation and limiting the individual power of states to avoid distribution overturning the status. The issue for today's world governance is to have a collective influence on the world's destiny by establishing a world system for regulating the many interactions that lies beyond the province of state action. The, the political homogenization of the planet that has followed the advent of what is known as liberal democracy in its many forms should make it easier to establish a world governance system that goes beyond market laissez-faire and the demographic piece originally formulated by Immanuel Kant, which constitutes a sort of geopolitical laissez-faire. Another view regarding the establishment of global governance is based on the difficulties to achieve the equitability, equitable, equitable development at the world scale to secure for all human beings in all parts of worlds the conditions following a decent and meaningful life requires enormous human energies and far-reaching changes in policies. The task is the task is all the more demanding as the world faces numerous other problems. Each relates to more even part of development changes, each similarly pressing and each calling for same urgent attention. But as Arnold has said, our age is the first generation since the dawn of history in which mankind dares to believe it practical to make the benefit of civilization available to the world human race. Needs, because of the heterogeneity of preferences which are enduring despite globalization, are often perceived as an implacable homogene- homogenization process. Americans and Europeans provide a good example of this point. On some issues, they have different common grounds in which the division between public and private spheres still exists. Tolerance for inequality and the growth demand for redistribution, attitudes towards risk and other property rights versus human rights sets the stage in certain causes. Globalization even serves to accentuate differences rather than that as a force of homogenization. Responsibility, but responsibility must be played. It must be the responsibility must play its part with respect to regional and international government when balancing the need of its citizenry. Crisis of purpose. Perry Jacquard, Jean Pisani, and Lawrence argued that to ensure that decisions taken for international integration and sustainable, it is important that populations seize the benefits, that that states agree their goals, and that is institutional governing the process are seen as legitimate. These three conditions are only partially being met. The authors refers to a crisis of purpose and international institutions suffering from imbalance and inadequacy. They believe that for these institutions a gap has been created between the nature of the problem that needs tackling and an institutional architecture which does not reflect the hierarchy of today's problem. For example, the environment has become a subject of major concern and central negotiation, but it does not have the institutional support that is compatible with its importance. World government. Global governance is not world government and even has less democratic globalization. In fact, global governance would not be necessary where there is a world government. Democratic government have monopolies has monopolies on the use of force, the power of enforcement. Global governance refers to political interaction that is required to solve problems that affect more than one state or region when there is no power to enforce compliance. Problem arises and networks of actors are constructed to deal with them in the absence of international analog to dem- domestic government. This system has been termed as dis- discredited sovereignty.